Hello, I'm Bob Falcone, CEO of the Columbus Medical Association. Today I have the privilege of talking to members of COTS, which is one of our affiliate organizations. COTS is celebrating 25 years in existence and has great stories to tell. We've got an incredibly talented board, and that's who we're going to be talking with. First, let me introduce Chief Sean Kozer. Sean is a firefighter, a EMS provider. He is a nurse, and he's just finishing up a master's degree in nurse practitioner nursing for family practice. He also has a master's degree in business administration and an executive master's degree in disaster planning and management. That's a lot of master's degrees.
It's a lot.
Jack of all trades, master of none, maybe.
Welcome.
Or master of three, I guess.
As a day job, he is deputy chief and shift commander for Columbus Fire. Monica Trenish is a nurse, has been a nurse for a long time. Most of that time has been spent in the ED. She's been with COTS for many years and has served as a previous board member with the Emergency Services Advisory Board, is currently a board member of COTS. Tom Allenstein is also a nurse, but he has spent most of the last couple decades working in EMS transport. He is represented in a number of local, regional, and national organizations as a leader. He is the current board chair of COTS. Been on the board, I believe, since 2007.
Something like that.
Yep. And as a day job, he's president and CEO of MedFlight and MedCare Ambulance. So let's talk a little bit. I got all this talent here, and I'd like to start with Chief Kozer. Chief, you were around before COTS got going. What was life like back then for the firefighters and paramedics?
Well, COTS has given us a great opportunity for people on all sides of the delivery of emergency medical services to come together and share our perspectives and improve processes and basically improve outcomes. Prior to the existence of COTS, there was a pretty significant disconnect, not just between the different agencies that deliver EMS in Central Ohio, but between those agencies and the hospitals. And COTS helped us come together and in the early days do things like EKG transmissions into the emergency departments, facilitating patients moving from the emergency department right up to the cath lab, things like that we were able to do because we all sat down and realized there was an opportunity to improve a process and improve outcomes. And that's just a couple of the early examples. It continues to make an impact today by providing guidelines for standardized protocols, getting us all together to sit down and what kind of different devices we're using or delivery protocols we have, things like that we can all sit down as systems and kind of get on the same page.
Yeah, it's been very impressive because the process has always involved the concept of continuous quality improvement, as you know. And my gosh, before COTS, it was the wild, wild west in Columbus, Ohio. And slowly but surely, as you had mentioned, we've begun to share protocols, develop process, and make it easier for someone who is ill or injured in the field to get to a hospital and get to the right hospital. Not only that, but you're able to track it and make sure that things are going the way they're supposed to go. We could spend hours talking about some of the innovations, and we'll probably come back to that. Let me go to Monica. Monica, you are the system director for emergency services for Mount Carmel Health. That's a big system. How does your interaction with COTS, how did it develop, and what do you feel it provides as far as benefits for your system and maybe some of the other hospital systems?
Yeah, so, I've been involved with COTS, or I was aware of COTS as my time as a charge nurse and assistant nurse manager, one of our systems in Central Ohio. And it was really the early diversion and how we were able to come together and to come up with a process and a system that benefited the community and the patients in our community to make sure that everybody was covered. And so it's just progressed from there, from emergency services and collaborating with that team to disaster preparedness. All of our hospitals are very involved with COTS in regards to making sure that if something would happen in Central Ohio, our community is covered, we're safe, we have a plan in place to help mitigate anything that would happen, and we continue to practice with those. So that collaboration has been key. I think that in these last 2 years, that really has come to light with the collaboration between competing systems in Central Ohio, and it's enabled us to make sure that we were all on the same page and we're doing what's best for the community and our patients, and focusing on the greater good versus what we may have focused on 20-25 years ago. So it continues to evolve with what we do on the hospital side, and I know that our system's very grateful for all that COTS does for us.
And you touched on a number of things that are, I think, really important. But the most important to me is the collaboration. We developed really trusting relationships from the trauma and emergency side over the years. But what was really interesting is how that translated into trusting relationships during the COVID pandemic. And not just trusting relationships between our health systems in Columbus and Central Ohio, but our entire region, which is 36 counties and 41 hospitals. People who would normally compete very aggressively were collaborating, and it was for the public good. And I think that's a lasting legacy that will probably survive us. The idea that, yeah, we can compete, but when it comes to the public, we do what's good for the public, for our constituents, rather than necessarily what's good for us. We'll come back to diversion because I think that's interesting, and that's one thing that COTS is national best practice at. Tom, you've been on board for a while. You've seen the changes. I think one of the most interesting changes we made over the last few years was separating out EMS, trauma, and disaster planning and management into 3 advisory groups. To me, that seems like it gives every one of those people the attention they deserve. Your thoughts on how that worked out?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I came to Ohio 2004, and it was shortly after I came here that I learned about COTS. My medical director, Howie Werman, got me involved, and just to come and see, as we've talked about collaboration, as we saw that early on, all these different entities coming together to talk. All the health systems were in one room, the EMS, we're all in one room, and we were talking, we were sharing openly our challenges and everything else. And then fast forward, times change, right? And as we go through, the board has been just very open to looking at how do we adapt, how do we change in a changing market. You look at Central Ohio Trauma Systems was a start, right? But we noticed that EMS became more and more important in this role, and we need to look at how do we focus our attention on all these different entities with disaster management and trauma and EMS and the board. We really had a lot of discussions strategically looking at, how do we give each entity its own value, its own discussion points, and its own, strategic visions. And the board really pushed forward on coming up with the 3 different entities and pushing that out. And I think it's been great. And as you mentioned, through the whole COVID pandemic, to see the level of discussions ensued as a result of all of those things, and be able to see the planning. We had, different entities going on with the protests, and how do we coordinate all of those things, not to mention all of the other things that COTS has been involved in. So I've seen a huge growth in the organization, specifically in the last 5 years, but all through that time that I've been involved with it.
Yeah, I think it's good that each organization gets the attention it needs, and the advisory boards are populated by people who are experts in that area. Obviously, they're experts on the COTS board in all those areas, but it's nice to have a focus. And when we talk about emergency services, we're not just talking about traditional pre-hospital EMS. We're talking about those things Chief Kozer mentioned, that early on we started to standardize not just trauma protocols and destination protocols, but also stroke, STEMI, sepsis, um, issues with overdoses and so forth. And I think that has really helped us make sure that those areas get the attention they need, and we develop the protocols they need. And I know, Sean, you're tied into a whole bunch of fire and EMS companies throughout the state, and I think a lot of them are adopting some of the things we've done.
Yeah, I think it's something we can be proud of to set an example that other people follow, not just in Central Ohio, but in the whole state and around the country too. I think we set the standard for things like immobilization of the what we did at the convention center, coming together with all the health systems to create that hospital there. And that's easy to do, just to get beds in place, but to solidify the process that if and when it would come to that the hospitals would be able to communicate, to distribute patients and staff there to help take care of that. And we were ready. And we talk about disaster preparedness too. It was a good exercise for us in the event that something else happens in the future, because we all know it's not if but when. And that made national news or attention, our efforts there. And I think that's definitely, like I said, something we can be proud of.
And what Chief Kozer's talking about, if you didn't know, is we as an organization and a group of health systems and actually hospitals throughout our region stood up a alternative care site for COVID in the Columbus Convention Center. We did it in 2 weeks, and we did it for under $2 million, including setup and teardown. If you're the kind of person that just needs to know, Google some of the other processes involved, see how many of them got stood up and how much they cost if they did. Very, very impressive. And I think because we were able to come together and collaborate. Monica, when we first started doing disaster planning and management, COTS was involved in a variety of things, and they weren't all injury related. We were involved in an interesting process. Over a dozen people got botulism, and we were involved in making sure those patients got to a hospital and got taken care of. And the question I most frequently got from people outside COTS was, what's COTS got to do with disaster and emergency management? And, especially from the CMOs, they would ask me, what do you guys have to do about this? What do you care about Ebola? What do you care about this and that and the other thing? And what I think really brought everybody to the table was COVID. They realized we do care and we do have something to offer. Your thoughts on that, Monica?
Yeah, I think that, that the botulism incident really helped to highlight the coordination of COTS and what that looks like from that patient population. It was, a very quick turnaround with getting the antidote into Central Ohio via, Ohio State Patrol. I mean, it was a project of looking at what we needed for the region, and COTS really helping to facilitate that. In regards to COVID, clearly our focus has been on COVID for the last 2 years, but one of the things that COVID has been able to do is really highlight COTS and all it does for our region, and really help highlight to our leadership teams at all of our systems. Because, it wouldn't be unheard of in the past that I would get the question, now, what's COTS and do we really need to? And I'd be like, yes, we do, and this is why, and let me explain it to you. But I can tell you that every executive leader and leader in our system are aware of COTS and all they do for us on, a daily, a weekly, a monthly basis. And, that highlighting of all of those resources that we've been able to pull together as a region has been just invaluable to patients and the care that we give them.
Yeah, it's really it makes me feel good. I suspect it makes all of us feel good that we are national best practice, and really, to my knowledge, not replicated anywhere else in the country. hopefully that'll change with time, because there are some real opportunities to improve the care of our constituents outside of Ohio, even outside of uh, our region, and that I think is the future. Tom, you're in the middle of a number of things and an expert in a number of things, but one of the things that you have really brought to the table is this whole concept of air medical transport and coordinating the multiple competing entities that fly in and out of Columbus.
Yeah, that was one of the early projects that I got involved in with the air medical community. Was really, as you look at the number of air ambulances flying in and out of Columbus, how do we coordinate all of these activities coming into the hospitals that only have maybe one helipad? And you've got, competing services that aren't necessarily communicating. And so COTS really helped spearhead working with the Air Medical Association to come up with a communication plan, and how do we handle this safely so that we can get patients adequately moved in and out of Columbus in a timely fashion but safely. And that was a big effort that is still ongoing, because everything changes as it goes on, and we've had new people enter and leave. As we have those, we need to make sure that wisdom gets imparted on the next generation, and all of that, and how to go about doing that. And that's been a huge, I think, asset to the city. You start talking, there's probably easily, 5,000-6,000 helicopters coming into Columbus annually. Which, by the time you start, looking at that on a daily basis, you start understanding how busy those airways are, and how much that potential could be. And it wasn't that many years ago that there was a mid-air collision of two air medical helicopters down in Arizona. And we want to make sure that we're, avoiding all of those kinds of activities.
Sure, and in fact, you flight follow for everybody coming and going, right?
So
Mid-flight.
yes. Yeah. So we had set up the plan to almost be like an air traffic control as we came in, to keep everybody coordinated, moving in and out safely so that people can offload, getting patients to where they need to go. So.
And Medflight, for those of you who aren't familiar, is one of the largest air medical transport companies in the country, probably the world. And I think the interesting thing about Medflight is its safety record is impeccable. And I believe it's because the board and the leadership are either clinicians or swayed by clinicians, and they think safety and patient first rather than bottom line.
Agreed.
And when you start mixing bottom line with helicopter transport, I think that's where we start to see some issues. And we're fortunate. I think your safety record is impeccable. It's just really, 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 really impressive. Sean, you talked earlier about destination and diversion protocols. And I think one of the things that we developed early on that just has evolved and is state of the art is this whole concept of real-time emergency room bed and hospital bed tracking, so that the EMS in the field and other hospitals know exactly what status a hospital is in. I believe some of our outlying regions are also, regional hospitals are also starting to use that tracking system. As part of that, what eventually developed was that if the majority of our hospitals in Central Ohio were on diversion, nobody was on diversion. We just round robined, and that's a really elegant solution to a complicated problem that a lot of other places don't even admit exists, which I find interesting. I think the next deployment of that is going to be right to the rigs, right? You're going to be able to access this information, or are you doing that already?
They can do it now, yeah.
Yeah.
So they can see the hospital status on the RTAS, real-time activity status board. And obviously the EPTP is both something near and dear to my heart and a pain in my neck most days. But for us to be in that transport plan, which is, as you mentioned, kind of the round robin, or the distribution of patients among the hospitals in our area, it really has had changed. Some hospitals would get patients in that plan that they wouldn't normally get, because we're diverting them from people who are busy. And I think it's obviously something that's constantly evolving. This year, we've put it to the test more than probably all the other years combined. And it's very successful. And like I say, we're still learning and improving the plan every day, reviewing it all the time. But that communication, the being able to get people still to an appropriate destination, not overloading a hospital who's already at the brink. And I know that some areas, when we talk about diversion, some cities are like, well, our hospitals never divert. Well, then I can guarantee you that your EMS crews sit in the hallways for 60, 90 minutes waiting on a bed then. And that's one of the strengths of the diversion plan from our perspective is that, or the transport plan, is that we don't have our crews wait extended amount of time to deliver the patient to the destination. That's important to both us to get back in service and to serve the community, but also to the patient to start receiving the appropriate care.
Yeah, that's key. The two things we want to make sure occur is that the patient gets safely transported to an appropriate facility and that the EMS system transporting gets quickly offloaded and back in service because you have limited resources. And when you start talking about some of these smaller communities, the resources become really limited. We saw that when we started talking about transportation from regional hospitals and our community hospitals in our region to Columbus for tertiary care. They were running out of ambulance transports. That time you were in the middle of that, trying to figure out how to make that work.
Yeah, it was pretty incredible as we saw the challenges based off of hospitals were full. How do we manipulate patients from this facility to this facility to offload because their staffing was patient to nurse ratios were so high that we needed to offload and then to coordinate that ambulance movements because it was non general types of transports that we were seeing. We were going to areas that we don't typically see, moving patients from Chillicothe to Coshocton, moving patients from Athens to Marion, doing a lot of different movements like that and to help coordinate. And that's been, I think one of the huge values that COTS has brought to the communities is really that area that we could sit down on those morning briefing calls and talk about how do the systems look? What do we need to do to help each other out? How can we move patients from this location to that location? Will that help you? Hospitals agreeing to accept patients, in a lateral transfer. It's just absolutely incredible the amount of teamwork going on during that time.
Yeah, I think one of the major strengths of our board and our advisory boards is the breadth and diversity of personnel and experience and talent. And that, just for example, with the three of you all know pre-hospital and you also all know hospital. So you can relate to each other's, when you're wearing your pre-hospital hat, you can relate to the pre-hospital, but you can also relate to the trouble the hospitals may be having and understand things like diversion. Sean, you're an ICU nurse, so you know exactly what it looks like when you've got to take care of more than two patients. Right. It gets very difficult, and not always unsafe, but potentially unsafe depending on the patient and what's going on. The other thing that I think has happened is that when COTS first started, we were mostly physicians. And over time, it has really diversified to a number of clinicians and other experts. And that just brings a lot of knowledge and talent into a discussion. So, Monica, I know you've been on the board for a bit, and you can see around you and see how amazing it is to have all this different talent to talk about a subject.
Yeah, I think that's important to make sure that the needs of the community are being met versus just what I may see from a little bit of pre-hospital and then the hospital side. And so I think that diversity is key in making sure that if we come to the table and I say, well, I think we should do this, and Tom says, well, think about the helicopter in the air and what they're thinking. Oh, I never thought of that. So I think that that has enabled us to, not just at the board level, but even at our, our rep committees and our emergency services committees, it gives us the opportunity to network with the folks that we work with daily, but we don't really work with. We take their patients, they take ours, and it enables us to understand really their side of the coin and how we can best meet the patient's need on a daily basis. And I think that that is key from what we do with COTS and the hospitals and EMS and HEMS and all of those things coming together. So yeah, the diversity is key, and knowing that who to go to is a part of the other opportunity that we have with COTS, is because I know that if I have a question about EMS, I can go to Sean, I can go to Tom about HEMS. If I have a question about, whatever it may be, I can reach out to Sherry and the team, and they'll be like, oh, I don't have that answer, but let's go to, X, Y, and Z to see if we can get one. So that's definitely, with the diversity of the group that all participates, is key, I think.
Sean, what are you most proud of with respect to COTS? I'll make you pick one thing.
I think just the fact that we turned around as a community, competing systems with maybe conflicting interests, and had everyone come together as a community. I think our sense of community is what I'm most proud of.
Monica, how about you?
That was totally my answer too.
I saw it on your card.
You did. You saw it on my notes. I sent you those ahead of time. But I mean, seriously, the reality is that the level of collaboration we've seen in these last 2 to 5 years has been, I mean, honestly, non-existent. And, I think that we all see that we're here for the community, our patients, and making sure that we're doing the best for them. And we really did that. And we're doing that. And I think that that is the thing that I'm most proud of being associated with COTS.
Tom, last word.
Last one, huh? So when I first took over the chair role on COTS, one of my first actions, I had asked Sherry and the team to get us hats. And the hats were very significant to me because they said COTS on it. And I wanted the people around the room from all their diverse backgrounds to know that I'm taking off my MedFlight hat, I'm taking off my Columbus Fire hat, I'm taking off my Mount Carmel whatever, and I'm putting on my COTS hat. And that we are working for a different reason now. And we saw that. We saw that take place on so many levels, on so many accounts during the past 2 years, especially, as we sit and look at how do we make sure that we're making all of the best efforts for all the citizens, not just in Central Ohio, but you got Southeast, you got South Central, we have people in all different counties. As you mentioned, 36 of the 88 counties were representative. And we're seeing people come together and dropping that hat of their health system or their department or whatever, and they're putting on the COTS hat and saying, this is what we need to do as an organization. And I think that's probably one of the most proud things. As we talk about the board and the diversity, we got public health, we got hospital administrators, we've got all of these people in a room discussing sometimes difficult topics and how do we deal with it and what's best for the communities. And that's what is, probably been the highlight of my time here, is to see the fruits of that as we see the actions that have taken place as a result.
Well, there you have it. 25 years of COTS, straight from the mouths of 3 Board of Trustee leaders who have lived it and make sure that it continues into the future. On behalf of the CMA and COTS, this is Bob Falcone.